Okay, so I have just deleted the object we had in our last video and brought up a new sphere because it was getting a little bit messy. So let's proceed with this sort of introduction to sculpting by talking about some of the non-sculpting brushes present in Blender. So because I have deleted the object and added a new one, I am still in object mode. So let's come to the top here, click on the drop down and move back into sculpt mode. Okay, this brings back up our brush and all of our brush tools on the side here. So we went over a lot of these brushes in the last video, and all of the brushes I covered were sculpting brushes, which is to say that clicking on the mesh and dragging them out would affect the geometry of this object. I'm going to just quickly subdivide this again by adding a subdivision surface modifier and applying it with Control and A. Okay, so now we just have a little bit more to work with, so we can see a little bit finer detail. So let's discuss some non-sculpting features of the sculpt mode. All right, so if we come down here, under our sculpting brushes, we'll start to see some other types of brushes. And the first thing I want to talk about is masking. Now, masking is sort of a foundational principle in digital art, and you will see it in 2D as well as 3D. You will see it in modeling, you will see it in sculpting, you will see it everywhere. So a mask is a feature of digital art software that selects, hides, and prevents the editing of a specific area. So let's see what this means in Blender with regards to sculpting. So to do this, I've just come down here, I've scrolled down in my tool panel, and I've selected the Paint Mask brush, which looks like this. So with this selected, let's increase our brush size a little bit. And let's just click and start drawing on our mesh. And what you'll see now is instead of moving around the vertices, it has just painted this black mark onto our mesh. And this black section is the mask. So now, with that painted on, what a mask can do, if I come into here and picked any of my sculpting brushes, for example, let's just choose draw. So now if I choose draw and I start to sculpt on this mesh and I sculpt through it, you'll see that Blender is sculpting under our brush strokes everywhere except where we have this mask painted. So anything underneath a mask will not be affected. And this is extremely useful for controlling which details and areas of your mesh you wish to sculpt. There's simply no way to be an effective sculptor, in my opinion, without learning to use a mask and learning to use it really well. Because you can sculpt many things without it, but you will just never be able to achieve the fine detail that you see in some of these really amazing sculpts without it. So we can paint a mask under our brush with the Paint Mask tool, but we can also select larger areas to mask with the Box Mask tool. So the Box Mask tool is a couple options down, and it is right here. So with the Box Mask tool selected, we can click and drag, and it will drag out a box selection on top of our mesh that when we release, creates a solid mask underneath it. So when we come into our draw brush, you can see that with the Box Mask tool, we can get much sharper edges. Now, the Box Mask tool, it's important to keep in mind, will also select through your mesh, whereas the Paint Mask tool will not. It's just something to keep in mind. All right, the next tool for non-sculpting functions I want to discuss is the hide tool. So similar to hiding areas in the modeling portion, we can hide portions of our sculpt by dragging out a box on our mesh. Now, this has not deleted anything. It has simply hidden all of the faces that were under this mesh. So if you have a very complex object and you've noticed parts of it are obstructing your view when you're trying to sculpt other parts of it, you can simply drag out and hide any portion of that mesh which you need to. To bring back the visibility of your entire object, simply press Alt and H, which is the same hotkey we used for returning hidden objects in the modeling section of the course. Now, you can drag out a box to delete portions of this mesh, and we can do that with the box trim tool, which is this icon here with the scissors. Now, the box trim tool, if you click and drag out a portion, it may take a little while to compute it, but once it has a run, you'll see we have this cut perfectly formed into our mesh, and if you press Alt H, nothing happens because in fact those faces are gone. They have been deleted. Now you may be wondering, why did this section turn green when I performed a box trim operation? Now this is because it has created what Blender calls a face set. This is also sometimes called a polygroup in other programs. So face sets are really just a way of assigning groups of polygon faces to a selection. But what does this mean? So if I were to take a sculpting brush and draw across the surface, well, it really hasn't affected it much at all, other than the fact that I have trimmed this selection, so there is not really a lot of geometry to work with. So if I were to tab into edit mode, you'll see that this is a single face, which will not work for sculpting. Let's go back into sculpt mode. So we can paint out our face sets in a more meaningful manner using the Draw Face Sets tool right here. So we can enable this tool and start drawing out. The color will be totally random, and the colors are just there to differentiate the groups from each other. They will have no bearing on the final color of your model. So clicking and dragging anywhere on this mesh with this tool active will create a new face set. If you wanted to edit this face set by expanding it, you could do so by controlling and clicking within this face set will extend it out. Now, controlling and clicking off of a face set will delete it when you paint over it. And just like the masking options, we have a paint face set option, and we also have a box face set option, which allows you just to create a new face set under a box selection. Of course, this will select through your mesh. Just be aware of that. So if I grab a sculpting brush now, because I have these painted over an area of our mesh that is appropriately dense for sculpting, let's look at what face sets do and what they're for. So if I drag it out now, it does nothing. It does not affect our sculpting brush in any way. So in order to make these face sets meaningful, we need to go here to the very top icon where it says Active Tool and Workspace Settings. So we covered this briefly in the interface overview section, but when we were in object mode, there weren't a lot of options in this panel, just really for what kind of selection mode you want and things like that. And that option is available right here as well as right here. So, however, when we go into sculpting mode, now we have a lot of options here for our individual brushes. So you'll notice that the preview and the settings change in this panel when I click over to different brushes. And this will all just give you advanced settings for each brush. So let's come into the draw brush and let's come down here to where it says advanced. Let's click the drop down. And now we see here we have an option that says face sets. So let's enable this and see what this does. So let's click and drag now. And now you'll see that when I sculpt over these areas, these face sets are acting like a mask. So this is very useful if you need to mask certain areas, but you need to keep the selection separate from each other, because the regular mask that you can draw that appears black on your mesh, there's no way to differentiate it from any other area that you need to mask out. So if you had two areas that were overlapping, let's say you had an area here that you needed to mask and an area here that you needed to mask, but you didn't want to make this one shape, you needed to keep these faces separate. Well, that is when you would use something like face sets. Now, there's ways to edit your face sets after you have created them. Let's just quickly create this face set. And that is with the Edit Face Set brush. So down here, down at the very bottom, you'll have a brush that says Edit Face Sets. And what this does is just allows you to manipulate this selection to change it as you need it. You can click on the face set to grow the selection however many times you need. You can click off of the face set to shrink it. So that covers all of the non-sculpting options that I wanted to cover. There are a few more you can see in the tool panel here. Go ahead and explore those at your leisure. Just try them out on a mesh, see what they do. But in the next video, I want to talk more about sort of the layers of subdivision that we have with our mesh and how we can more dynamically control that within sculpting mode. So I will see you in the next video.